Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. It all started with something small, too small to even call a red flag. Olivia, my wife, had recently picked up yoga, and honestly, I was thrilled for her. She said it helped with stress, that it made her feel stronger, more in control. 3 times a week, she packed her mat and left for a session at a boutique studio across town. I never questioned it. Why would I? But one evening, as I was driving home, I saw her car, not at the yoga studio, but parked in front of an apartment complex. At first, I told myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe she had a friend there? Maybe the class had ended early? My heart pounded as I drove past slowly, looking up at the building. Lights were on in some units. Shadows moved behind curtains. I thought about calling her, but something stopped me. Instead, I went home, pretending nothing had happened. That night, as Olivia walked through the door, all smiles and post-yoga glow, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I decided to play along. The next day, I casually asked about her yoga class, what poses they'd practiced, how the instructor was. She answered smoothly, without hesitation. Too smoothly. I knew something wasn't right. So, I did what any curious wife would do. I checked the yoga studio's website. My heart dropped. The class she claimed to have attended wasn't even on the schedule that day. The next time Olivia said she was going to yoga, I followed her. I felt ridiculous, like some paranoid detective in a bad movie. But my instincts told me I had to know the truth. She drove straight to the same apartment complex. This time, I parked a little further away and waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. My hands were sweating against the steering wheel. And then, I saw her, stepping out of her car, looking around as if checking for someone watching. Then she walked straight into the building. I couldn't just sit there. My heart raced as I got out of my car and approached the entrance. I didn't go in, not yet. Instead, I checked the names on the buzzers. One of them stood out, Ethan Carter. A name I didn't recognize, but it felt important. I took a picture of the directory before walking back to my car. When Olivia came home that night, I pretended everything was normal. But my mind was spinning. Who was Ethan Carter? And what was my wife doing in his apartment? The name Ethan Carter haunted me. It didn't ring any bells, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to know more about him. I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of questions. Was he a friend from work? A yoga buddy? Or something more? Olivia still seemed so carefree, talking about everything except what I needed to know. She told me she was meeting a friend for coffee one afternoon, but when I asked her about it later, her details didn't quite match up. I turned to social media. If there was one place people revealed more than they intended, it was Facebook or Instagram. I typed Ethan's name into the search bar, only to find a profile picture of a handsome man, dark hair, sharp jawline. No mutual friends. But there was something about his eyes. The way they looked so confident, like he was used to getting exactly what he wanted. I dug deeper, scrolling through his posts. And there it was, a photo of him, Olivia, and a group of people at a barbecue last summer. They looked too comfortable together, too close. I couldn't take it anymore. That night, I sat Olivia down in our living room. I need to know who Ethan is, I said, my voice trembling. She blinked, eyes widening. What do you mean? She asked innocently. I showed her the picture I'd found on Instagram, her arm around his waist, a smile on her face that didn't look like the one she gave me. Olivia's face faltered, and for a split second, I saw a crack in her perfect mask. She tried to brush it off. It's nothing, just a guy I met at the studio. But the way she said it sounded rehearsed, defensive. I pressed her further. Olivia, I saw your car. I saw you walk into his apartment. Tell me the truth. Her face went pale, and the silence between us grew heavy. Then she sighed, and in that moment, I knew I wasn't going to like what she said next. It's not what you think, she whispered. I've been seeing him for a while. My heart dropped into my stomach. What do you mean, seeing him? Olivia, are you? She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to ruin what we had. Her words hit me like a punch. She wasn't just going to yoga. She wasn't just meeting a friend. Olivia had been seeing Ethan for months, sneaking around, living a double life. Why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why him? Why didn't you tell me? She looked away, guilt written all over her face. I thought I could balance both, but I couldn't. Ethan, he's everything I thought you weren't anymore. He listens, he understands me in ways you don't. I don't know how it happened, but I fell for him. I sat there in stunned silence. Every word she said felt like a slap to the face. Ethan was everything I wasn't, according to her. But I couldn't understand. How had I missed all the signs? How had she fallen for him and kept it hidden for so long? I asked, almost pleading, "Didn't I mean anything to you?" Olivia's face softened, but it was too late. "Of course you did. I never wanted to hurt you. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like your priority." The words stung, and I felt my chest tighten with betrayal. For the next few days, everything between us was filled with silence. The life we had built together, our routines, our laughter, the comfort of just being near each other, felt like a distant memory. I watched Olivia go about her day, trying to act normal, but there was an invisible wall between us. She was no longer the woman I had married. She was someone else, someone I didn't know. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but all I could do was watch as she carried on, her eyes occasionally flicking toward me with guilt and shame. I couldn't just let it go. I needed to know everything. I had to understand why Olivia had lied to me for so long. So, I started digging. I found an old message she had sent to her sister about Ethan. It was casual, but there was a hidden layer of affection in her words, the kind of affection that was never meant for me. She had been slipping away from me, inch by inch, without me even realizing it. I confronted her again. "How long, Olivia? How long have you been lying to me?" She hesitated but finally admitted, "It started with yoga, just casual conversations. But then it turned into something more." One afternoon, as I sat in our living room, trying to make sense of the mess, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, there he was, Ethan. He stood there, tall, confident, almost as if he had been waiting for this moment. My heart raced, and I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. "We need to talk," he said calmly, as if this whole situation was just another casual conversation for him. Olivia, standing behind me, looked conflicted, torn between the two of us. "Ethan, I didn't think it would come to this." But it had, and the truth was staring us all in the face. Ethan didn't mince words. "I didn't come here to make things harder for you," he said, his eyes not meeting mine. "I just want to be with Olivia, and I can't keep sneaking around." The audacity, the nerve. I wanted to scream, to throw him out, but instead, I just stood there, stunned by the nerve of him. Olivia looked at me with a mixture of guilt and resolve. I never planned on this, but I can't keep living a lie. I wanted to cry, to beg her to stay, but I was frozen. Was I still fighting for a marriage that was already over? Ethan's words echoed in my mind long after he left. Olivia and I sat in the silence of the house that had once felt like a home, but now it felt like a battlefield. She wasn't just my wife anymore. She was someone caught between two worlds. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered again, but the repetition of her apology felt empty. I couldn't tell if it was guilt for what she'd done or guilt for wanting to be with someone else. "So what now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What happens now, Olivia?" She looked up at me with tears in her eyes, but all I could see was the distance between us. I had spent so many years with Olivia, thinking I knew everything about her. But now, I felt like a stranger in my own home. That night, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, neither of us eating, I realized just how far we had drifted. The trust we once shared had evaporated, and in its place was a pit of uncertainty and betrayal. Olivia finally spoke, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to do anymore." Her words were raw, vulnerable, but they didn't ease the anger building inside me. "What do you mean you don't know? You've made your choice." The days that followed were nothing but a blur of questions and emotions I couldn't quite process. Olivia was distant, but so was I. She went to see Ethan again, and I stayed behind, pacing the house. I had always believed that love was enough to fix anything, that time and effort could heal all wounds. But now I wasn't so sure. Every time I looked at her, I saw the woman I thought I knew, the woman who had promised to love me forever, slipping away. And I couldn't figure out how to hold on. "Why him?" I asked, choking on the words. "Why Ethan?" She looked at me with sad eyes. "Because with him, I felt seen. I needed closure. I couldn't live in this limbo, waiting for Olivia to make up her mind. I thought about leaving, about walking away and never looking back. But I couldn't. Not yet. I found myself at a crossroads, unsure of what path to take. So, I did something unexpected. I reached out to Ethan. I couldn't let him have the last word. I needed to hear it from him directly. When we met at a cafe, I was prepared for a confrontation. But what I didn't expect was for him to be so understanding. I didn't want to be the one who came between you two, he admitted, his voice surprisingly calm. But I couldn't ignore the connection Olivia and I have. As much as I hated him for what he had done, I couldn't ignore the fact that Ethan was being honest with me. But I didn't want honesty, I wanted my wife back. After our conversation, I returned home to find Olivia sitting on the couch, waiting for me. Her eyes were red, her face puffy from crying. "We need to talk," she said softly, her voice cracking. This was it. The moment where everything would either break or heal. As I sat down across from her, I realized something. No matter what happened next, we couldn't go back to what we once had. There was no going back. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. Olivia's face was a mixture of guilt and resignation, while I struggled to control the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. I wanted to believe her, to forgive her, but something inside me had already broken. The trust we once shared was shattered beyond repair. "Olivia," I said, my voice tight with emotion, "I can't keep pretending everything is fine. This isn't just about yoga anymore, is it?" She looked away, not able to meet my gaze. And that was the moment I knew. This marriage was over. The next few days were a blur of emotions, decisions, and painful realizations. Olivia spent most of her time with Ethan, while I stayed behind, trying to piece together my broken heart. I told her I needed space, but deep down, I knew we couldn't fix what was broken. The betrayal had cut too deep. One afternoon, as I sat in our living room, I came to a heartbreaking conclusion. I had to let go. Olivia had already made her choice, and I couldn't keep holding on to a love that had slipped through my fingers. I packed a few things and left the house that we had once shared, knowing I was walking away from everything. The days after I left were a mixture of relief and pain. I rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, away from everything that reminded me of Olivia. I tried to focus on rebuilding my life, but the emptiness in my heart was hard to ignore. I spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if I would ever feel whole again. But slowly, the fog started to lift. I started meeting new people, trying new things, and, most importantly, finding myself again. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but little by little, I began to heal. Months passed before Olivia reached out to me. She called one evening, her voice shaky. "I've made a huge mistake," she confessed. "I can't stop thinking about you. I miss you, and I regret everything." Part of me wanted to rush back to her, to embrace the woman I had loved for so long. But the other part of me, the part that had grown stronger, more independent, knew I couldn't go back. "Olivia," I said gently, "I can't keep doing this. I need someone who chooses me, not someone who keeps running back to the past." The words were painful, but they were the truth. Olivia and I never spoke again after that conversation. She tried to contact me a few more times, but I had already made my peace. I focused on my own growth, my own healing. I threw myself into my work, into my passions, and into the new friendships I had formed. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. And though there were moments when I missed the comfort of our shared memories, I knew deep down that I was better off without the weight of betrayal hanging over me. It had been months since Olivia and I last spoke, and I thought I was finally moving on. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. One day, I was walking through a local cafe when I saw her. Olivia was sitting at a table with a man I didn't recognize, laughing in a way that felt so foreign. I froze, watching her as she sipped her coffee, completely unaware of my presence. For a moment, my heart ached, remembering how we once shared similar moments. But then, I felt something else, something stronger. It was the realization that I had survived without her. Curiosity got the better of me, and I watched from a distance as Olivia and her companion continued talking. The man was taller than me, well-dressed, and appeared to be completely at ease with her. As they stood to leave, he placed his hand on her lower back, guiding her toward the door. I felt a pang in my chest, but there was no anger, just an overwhelming sense of finality. This was no longer the woman I had known. She had moved on, and in some strange way, so had I. The worst part? I couldn't bring myself to feel bitter about it. I just let it go. A week later, I met up with an old friend, someone who had been there for me through everything. As we sat at a bar, sipping our drinks, I couldn't help but talk about Olivia. "Do you ever think about going back to her?" my friend asked. It was a simple question, but it stopped me in my tracks. I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. No, I think I'm done. She's happy with someone else now, and so am I. It's time for both of us to move on. My friend nodded, understanding my answer, but there was something in their eyes that made me realize I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. The following week, I received an email from Olivia. It was simple, just a few lines, but they carried a weight I wasn't ready for. She said she was sorry, that she had realized she made a huge mistake, and that she missed me. My heart clenched at the words, but I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I had learned something important. I had to choose my own happiness first. It was time to let go completely. I deleted the email without a second thought. I had already said goodbye in my heart, and I didn't need her to tell me what I already knew. The days after Olivia's email were filled with reflection. I realized that what had happened between us wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about me discovering my own strength. I spent more time focusing on my goals, my happiness, and my future. Slowly, I began to open up to the idea of new relationships, new experiences. I didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. I had been through the hardest part of my life, and I had come out stronger on the other side. Olivia had been a chapter in my life, but I was finally ready to write the next one. It had been months since Olivia and I last spoke, and I thought I was finally moving on. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. One day, I was walking through a local cafe when I saw her. Olivia was sitting at a table with a man I didn't recognize, laughing in a way that felt so foreign. I froze, watching her as she sipped her coffee, completely unaware of my presence. For a moment, my heart ached, remembering how we once shared similar moments. But then, I felt something else, something stronger. It was the realization that I had survived without her. Curiosity got the better of me, and I watched from a distance as Olivia and her companion continued talking. The man was taller than me, well-dressed, and appeared to be completely at ease with her. As they stood to leave, he placed his hand on her lower back, guiding her toward the door. I felt a pang in my chest, but there was no anger, just an overwhelming sense of finality. This was no longer the woman I had known. She had moved on, and in some strange way, so had I. The worst part? I couldn't bring myself to feel bitter about it. I just let it go. A week later, I met up with an old friend, someone who had been there for me through everything. As we sat at a bar, sipping our drinks, I couldn't help but talk about Olivia. "Do you ever think about going back to her?" my friend asked. It was a simple question, but it stopped me in my tracks. I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. No, I think I'm done. She's happy with someone else now, and so am I. It's time for both of us to move on. My friend nodded, understanding my answer, but there was something in their eyes that made me realize I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. The following week, I received an email from Olivia. It was simple, just a few lines, but they carried a weight I wasn't ready for. She said she was sorry, that she had realized she made a huge mistake, and that she missed me. My heart clenched at the words, but I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I had learned something important. I had to choose my own happiness first. It was time to let go completely. I deleted the email without a second thought. I had already said goodbye in my heart, and I didn't need her to tell me what I already knew. The days after Olivia's email were filled with reflection. I realized that what had happened between us wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about me discovering my own strength. I spent more time focusing on my goals, my happiness, and my future. Slowly, I began to open up to the idea of new relationships, new experiences. I didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. I had been through the hardest part of my life, and I had come out stronger on the other side. Olivia had been a chapter in my life, but I was finally ready to write the next one. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.